sort of my second home in ProMongers now that I'm, working. I live in Chicago, but I work with these guys over here. I work at Restore Health, and so I'm timing my monthly visits to come visit you kind of people, and figured why not use the time to show you something about Mojolicious. I am on the core development team. I would say that if there are specialities in the core development team, mine is in the async stuff, and truly learning a lot of the routing stuff now that I'm using it in Anger day to day, which has been kind of fun. But I'm not going to talk too much about that because mostly routing is the same between all the frameworks. Dancer, Catalyst, routing is routing. It all patterns after Ruby Sinatra at this point. So once you've learned it once, you've learned it everywhere. I'm going to have to figure out how to not block you guys. The meta slot. How am I going to do this?
I can move. I'll just move to the other side.
Okay, if that's okay with you.
Sure, that's fine.
I always like to include a meta slide because the talk itself is online, and so I always want it to be clear to people when I wrote it and when I updated it. So I've just updated the talk today. You're welcome to follow along. It's live here at jberger.github.io/Mojolicious introduction. Tablet friendly and all that other good stuff thanks to Reveal.js. And the source code is available on my GitHub as well. All the samples that you see in this talk actually run, and they run as shown and are included in the repository. So feel free to continue along. I believe I've tested them all to recent Mojoliciouses. They should be at least close, but yeah. And then the other meta slide, how to get help. If there's only one slide you remember, this is it. Mojolicio.us is our main site. And probably the best way to start learning Mojolicious is through Glenn Hinkle's wonderful Mojocast site. My only complaint with it is if you visit mojocasts.com, it gives you the most recent episode, which is episode 5. You probably want to start with episode 1, so go to /E1. And of course, #mojo on irc.perl.org. We have a fairly strict policy of niceness always, so if you're afraid of IRC, that doesn't necessarily apply here. On with the talk. So what is Mojolicious? Mojolicious is a web framework, of course. I think you all know that. We call it duct tape for the HTML5 web. This is pirating from the old saying from CGI.pm, which was duct tape for the web. We're trying to be the duct tape for the new web. Mojolicious was designed from the ground up, a new code base, but based on years of developing Catalyst. The lead developer of Mojolicious was the lead developer of Catalyst until he started Mojolicious. In fact, Mojo was meant to be new internals for Catalyst, and then due to backwards compatibility concerns, they didn't want to do that. History aside, that's basically where Mojo came from. More specifically, it's portable, runs on every operating system that Perl runs on. It has no non-core dependencies. This is softening a little bit. We still are no non-core dependencies as long as you're running 520. But we do depend on some things that are only new in 520. The rest of those things are obviously backported on CPAN. Batteries included. We come with lots of extra libraries. Nearly all of them are optional. You don't have to use Mojo's JSON parser, for example, but it's built in if you want it, and you'll see why you might want to do that coming up. Specifically, the reason it was a rewrite from Catalyst was it's real-time non-blocking internals. You basically can't do non-blocking unless your web framework was designed for non-blocking. There are ways to shim it and all other kind of ways to do that, but you're still going to have troubles until you write a web framework with intention of being non-blocking, and that's where Mojo came from. Our new tagline is, the buzzword Z thing is perfect for building highly scalable web services. Mojolicious is 8,778 lines of source code. That was checked just this afternoon, and is 10,773 tests. I love that it's more tests than lines of code. 91.3% coverage. Sebastian wants me to tell you that only happens because you can't test some of the pre-forking stuff. So it would be even better than that if not for that. And then easy to install. We have a one-liner. It's on the front page of the website that lets you install it. Obviously, you can install through CPAN. You guys all know how to do that. But very simple hello world. It can actually even be a little easier than this, but I wanted to show at least this much. So first we import Mojolicious Lite. We set up a route handling the slash route, the root of the website. And we render text, hello world. Shift here, we're shifting off the controller. This is basically an anonymous controller action. And then app start just tells it to start. When we import Mojolicious Lite, what we also get is strict warnings, UTF-8, and all the 510 features. So things like say, define door, all that other good stuff. Obviously you saw that it handles the slash route, renders the text as text, and starts the app. Then you start it. If we called that script, you start it with just /script daemon. That's the basic Mojolicious built-in web server. It's the basis of all the other web servers too, so it's all the same code for the servers. We also package in a development server called Morbo. Morbo watches your source files, and if you change the source files, will automatically restart the app. So you can develop along the way, flip over to your browser, and it's already running the new code. For deployment, Hypnotoad, pre-forking web server, which basically is comparable to something like Starman if you're used to regular Plaque servers. Its extra little feature is zero downtime restarts, which I believe Starman can do if you configure it right. But it's really great. You can, refresh, you can rewrite code, you can upgrade your Perl, whatever you want to do. Restart it, and you don't lose a single connection in the meantime. Of course, Mojolicious is Plaque compatible. It's not written on Plaque, but it is Plaque compatible. It will run just fine with Plaque Up or Starman. One thing you do lose, though, is some of the non-blocking features. Because it's not built on the Mojo reactor at that point, then it's not quite non-blocking in the way that you might want. If you really need Starman, ask why you really need Starman. It's not that different of code, really. It will also run on CGI, but why? Let's take it a little more. Let's do a Hello User app. So now we're going to define a new app that handles slash and all the top level routes. So /Joel will say hello Joel. We'll also do, so then that Joel becomes a variable in the stash. Stash very similar to Catalyst if you're used to Catalyst. Just a bucket that goes along with a request that lets you store things to be used later. And then we're going to stash some other useful values just to show you how that works. And then we'll render a template. So once again, we have a handler with any. So this is any meaning get, post, whatever. We're going to put the default name to world. And once again, we're going to shift off the controller itself. We're going to stash the time as your regular Perl local time. Then we're going to render the hello template. And then app start. We can put the templates right in the data section if you want. Immediately, one thing you can see here is the basic layout. A layout is sort of a reusable bit of code that you can declare later. A template can declare that it uses a layout. And in that way, I don't have to keep showing you all the, doc type, HTML head, title, whatever else. Content just gets placed in here, and title will get placed in there. Never have to worry about it again. And all the rest of the examples will declare layout basic. So here we have title, hello, name. Name just comes from the stash. And we have a p tag, hello, name, where this is sort of the interpolate mark. It's a lot like Mason was. The extra equal sign versus Mason says to XML escape the results. 2 equal signs says don't XML escape the results. No equal signs is evaluate it, but don't put in the contents. And so here we have a tag helper, just a little sugar to make a p tag, and the time is now time. Simple enough. But now we can get to testing. And I think testing is one of the places where Mojolicious really shines. So first of all, we import Mojo-base-strict. That gives you all the same kind of features that Mojolicious Lite gives you: strict warnings, UTF-8, and 510 features. Import test more and test Mojo. For light apps, you have to do this little shenanigans. All right, fine, I guess. It's cuter in full apps. It's one of the few differences between full apps. You'll see the light app syntax here. They are exactly and totally the same. People worry about writing a light app and then moving to a full app. Not hard. It uses all the same code under the hood. So the important thing is we make a new test Mojo instance, and then we can run tests against it. So we do get OK. It actually fires up a server. This is not fake servers like Catalyst used, which is funny because Sebastian apparently created that concept and then went away from it for Mojo because you can't do non-blocking that way. We check that the status of the return value is 200, it's success. And we're going to check that content is like this regex hello world. Content is like a time. We're going to do the same thing for Joel. Hello Joel. Content is like the time. I've been kind of debating all day. Do people want to see me switch over to the terminal and run these? Because I can, but no. Okay. And then done testing the usual. And hello. It has decided to hate me.
It's a good time to switch over to the terminal.
There we go. As I already said, it loads the light app. You have to load with this require nonsense. Full apps, you'll just do test Mojo new with the class name. And we tested those things. But I hope you guys all asked yourself, do you really just have to regex on the result? Yeah, that's kind of ugly, isn't it? All right, let's take an aside and talk about Mojo DOM. Mojo DOM is an HTML/XML parser that is bundled in with Mojolicious. It has CSS3 selectors, so the same selectors you're used to with jQuery or doing CSS. You can see the full list of the selectors in Mojo DOM CSS. It's basically everything you'd imagine you would need. There are a few that are omitted, but they're only JavaScript useful anyways, who cares? So then, if you want to find, the easy way to say it is if you want to find an element, the first element of a type you do @, and it returns a Mojo DOM object. Or if you do a find, you get a collection of objects with Mojo collection. Mojo collection is just a blessed array, which has some nice overloadings for you, but it's not so useful here. Here's a quick example, and this one I will run. I'm just going to declare some HTML up here. And the important thing is we're going to find is the important text. We want to figure out, I know that I've got some kind of structure and I want to use Mojo DOM to find it. So I'm going to build a new Mojo DOM instance and say @.something, which here's our class something, that's the selector syntax for class. And then we're going to take the first p tag inside of it. And then we're going to print, say, the text. And sure enough, if I do, there it is. Is that really going to do that to me every time? That's really annoying. Maybe we won't run any of these samples. So now that we know that, I'm going to tell you that Test Mojo has those selectors we just saw, has all the powers of Mojo DOM, Mojo JSON, and the Mojo user agent all built in. And it wraps many of the useful features of Test More. So back to our example, the same top matter, but instead, now we get to say text is, and these are basically using the syntax. So the first P is hello world, and that's now equals, not regex. We can say text like, but be a little more specific on where. So the nth of type is a really ugly, but it works, CSS selector. I could have put an ID on there, but I wanted to show you that CSS selectors have really powerful things like nth of type. So I want the second P, and then I want a regex on that. Now, if that pattern matched somewhere else in the text, for example, you don't want it to match. You want to say, I want this thing, but I need to match a time. And of course, the same works with Hello Joel. Oh, dear goodness. How do you do a page down on? I'm still learning a Mac, by the way. How do you do page down?
Function down.
Okay, great. We want this to just work. A couple of little things I'm going to introduce just real quickly. Helpers are methods that get shared around in the app. So I know I'm going to need some functionality. I'm going to need it in more than just one controller class. We can declare it as a helper. We can then bundle those up as plugins, so you can even share them across different apps if you have them. And a bunch of helpers are available by default, like default helpers, which has a lot of the basic functionality that you would use, and tag helpers, which is how I built those tags. Sessions. Sessions are built in. They are signed cookies, so the information is stored client side, but they aren't able to tamper with it. If they tamper with it, it fails signature and it gets thrown away, totally without you having to deal with it. Still means don't store any private information in there, but mostly you don't have to. Store the fact that they're authenticated and authenticated as user, and that'll be good enough. With that, I can show you kind of a wordy example. I'm not going to quite go into it in detail. If you're really interested, just look at the repository on my GitHub. But basically, it shows an example where I can use a validate helper once the request comes in, and how do I do this? If they validate, then you store their username in the session. Very simply, looks a lot like storing things in the stash. This doesn't look like it's going to do much useful if they fail to log in, but oh, that's because, right. See, this is why I should read my slides again. The template actually will provide a form if they aren't logged in, and it will say hello to them if they are logged in. And again, you can peruse this at your leisure, but it works, and what's more interesting will be the tests for it. So I'm going to move on. Mojo user agent, to take another little aside, gives you a full user agent with a built-in cookie jar, handles the redirects for you as long as you turn that on. SSL and proxy support is built in. SSL, I believe, means an external module, but not a big deal. DOM and JSON, of course, and content generators, so you can pass it a hash and say submit this form or submit this as JSON. And it's even non-blocking if you pass it a callback. Here's a little example. We can use the user agent. First of all, we set up these max redirects, so it'll say allow up to 10 redirects. You won't even notice they happen. We're going to request from Meta CPAN the current release version of Mojolicious. Request release Mojolicious, get the response, parse that as JSON, take out the version. Real easy. More interesting example, I'm going to build up a URL because, string catting all the query parameters together is ugly. So I'm going to go to Open Library. I'm going to ask for Perl. Perl is the search term, and request it as JSON. I guess I could have even been a little more pedantic about that if I wanted to be. And then query details equals true, so that's going to be a query argument. Question details equals true. Then we're going to request that with Git, take the response, parse it as JSON, and then this is a cute little syntax called a JSON pointer. The JSON pointer says go to the works key, the 0th element, title, and print that. And what's kind of fun is if we run that, let's see what the first example is. It's learning Perl. That's kind of fun. And Mojolicious is currently at 5.77, so all is right with the world. This thing is still giving me troubles. And of course, we can test our login example. We're going to test that we only see the form when we're not authenticated, that the user agent generates contents from a hash, and that the user agent follows a redirect, because the logout is a redirect. And sure enough, it's true. We can do set max redirects equals 2 in the tester's user agent. Do our text status is 200, and see that we're not logged in. Element exists form, so the form is on the page. We build, where did it go? Yeah. Put in some credentials here, post that to the form. Once you post, it redirects you back to the page. So you would expect to see a 301, 302, I don't remember the 30 whatever's. But in fact, we see a 200, and that's because the redirect's handled transparently. We regex that we can see the name now, and we can test element exists not form. So we don't have a form. We can then go to logout, status is 200, again it redirected transparently, and the element's back. Really hates me. Content negotiation. Hope you're not bored yet. This is going through real fast. Just go back and look if you have to. Content negotiation is pretty cool. RESTful apps often support many different formats, as we heard about 2 months ago. Maybe you want to have a representation of a resource as XML or as JSON or whatever. And Mojolicious has little helpers that let you do that. The respond to can detect the format that you have that has been requested, and then you can tell it how to respond to each of those types. We can also use built-ins reply not found and reply exception for 400 and a 500 page if we need. I think maybe the battery is just running out, which is really annoying. So here again is a little example. We just have some data. It's just some random junk. I should come up with something better than that. And you request a certain ID. So each of these are indexed by an ID 1, 2. So we're going to reply not found unless it can find the data specified by that stash ID. And then assuming you found something, because we didn't reply not found already, if they wanted text, we'll respond with text, joining the items with a comma. If they want JSON, reply with JSON. This is just how Mojolicious, these are the stash parameters that you're passing back to the response. And when you have a JSON parameter, it's going to encode that as JSON and use that as a response. Anything else, we're going to render the template page. We're going to assume HTML, and we're going to stash the item in the foo parameter because, you know, I'm not very creative. And
is one of those texts misspelled? Is that just me being...
No, because it's a good question, actually. And maybe I should bring that up. So the default here is txt because you might request .txt. But the stash key text maybe ought to be txt. I guess I can see an argument either way.
Or accept either.
Yeah, maybe you can even accept either. But yeah, no, this is correct, and it works. Of course, we can have a template, pretty expected result there. Now, before we test content negotiation, we have to talk about what we can actually test for. So the default is HTML, unless you would set that otherwise in your app. You can specify it with a query parameter, question format equals something. We can test it by an extension, so .txt or .json or .html, or the accept header. All of those will tell Mojolicious to handle a certain type of format. And we're also going to test the 404 page. This thing is still not working for me. So here's our test. Skipping the regular content here. We can test /0. Remember, we didn't have a /0 content, so we should get status as 404. We can request /1. And because we didn't give it any sort of format, it's going to assume HTML. So we can check that text is like a p argument that matches some sort of regex. We can test the format equals text. Content is baz-bat. Test JSON with one.json. Check that JSON is. That's using is deeply using from test more. We can set the accept header and see that we still get JSON. Still not working here. Still not impressed? Let's write a pop-up website. Going to request the documentation from CPAN, but that's going to take some time. Do you want it blocking your server while you do that? Rather not. So while it waits to render the response, let's not block. So our app needs a user agent of its own. We're going to set up a base URL that we're going to clone later on. When you visit /module, where the default is Mojolicious, of course, first thing we're going to tell it to do is render later. So we're saying we're not going to reply right away. And then pull the module name out of the stash, clone the URL, and put that onto the path. So it'll be like /Mojolicious. We then tell the user agent to get, and we pass it a callback. So this subroutine here gets called when the user agent returns the information from CPAN. In that, we render the docs template where we've stashed pod as the response body. And
Is UA a global variable there? It's just a...
here, I created it up here on top.
Oh, okay.
One actually does.
Go back up to the top again.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
And just to have a little fun, let's actually start this. No. What did I call that thing? NB. Let's start the daemon. Let's go to. What's your favorite module? You.
Text CSV.
Ta-da! Working just fine. Not very pretty, but that's to be expected, perhaps. And it didn't block the server while it did it, which is always nice.
Didn't you have a question, JP?
No,
He just wanted to see the top again. WebSockets. WebSockets are maybe the biggest reason why non-blocking Reactor internally for Mojolicious was important. WebSockets are a way to leave a connection open between the client and the server. Don't have to do any fancy, pretending you have an image that hasn't loaded yet, and let that hang there forever. The client opens the WebSocket connection to the server. In this example, we're going to have the server respond every second with data. This is just going to be random data. We're going to plot it like a time series. Obviously, a real app would have more interesting data, maybe stock prices, or I don't know, something like that. The code looks like this. So as soon as the first thing they're going to do is request /. But then the client is going to request /data as a WebSocket. We're going to set up a timer that every second is going to send some generated data. Generated data is just some random data. I'm using jQuery's float library to plot it. And this is all you need for a WebSocket. We create a new WebSocket. We're actually getting the URL from Mojolicious. It's got this cool URL for, by the way, I should mention. You don't have to hard code basically any URLs in your templates. And that's really handy if you want to relocate things, or this is requesting URL for by name. So if I were to rename the route, it would just update them automatically. Put it at some other path, whatever. It's bound by name, not by path. And then here's just every time I get a message, the JavaScript is going to push that into the data and redraw the plot. And because this one is cool, I'm going to run it too. Oh, got it started as daemon. And once a second, we get random data. And this is coming from the client, or from the server to the client. And it'll just keep doing that until I tell it to stop.
How many, does it, if a connection is not receiving any data, it's just connected, hanging out, subscribed, waiting for data.
There is a timeout.
Yeah, I was going to say, is there a timeout, and is it, and how is that on the server? Is it hard on the server? Could you have millions of connections simultaneously waiting? What's
The old standard was, can you have 10,000 open connections at a time?
Yeah.
We can do that easily, breaking a sweat. A lot of people, that was used to call that C10K was the name for that. Sort of the challenge was, can you hold 10,000 open connections? I think a lot of people are now more worried about like C500K.
Yeah.
Yeah, these are really lightweight, and transport over them is really lightweight too. And actually, it was one of the very first things I did for Mojolicious was I helped set up the JSON over WebSocket handling. So it's actually really well built to say, I'm going to use WebSockets to transport JSON. A lot of easy handling for that built right in.
Let's say I have, sorry.
Go ahead, please.
Let's say that I have a background process that's running that's not inside of Mojo. Right? I have a background process doing stuff, and I want to update the web client as to the progress of this background process. How am I communicating with Mojo over that so that I can send that data out over the website?
And as long as you've got some way to talk to it, right? You can, assuming you've got some pipe.
Is there anything built into Mojo for that use case, or do you have to build your own? Because some systems have stuff built in for that.
Well, okay, so I wrote a fork process helper. It's not meant for that use case. It's more like set and forget and then wait for like an end response. There are other modules that other people have written that do more like back and forth talking with a fork. Those are obviously a little more finicky because they kind of depend on what your use case is. Mojo does have handling for like watching file handles and things like that. And of course, you can use any event through EV. So if you're used to any event, that's handled pretty transparently.
So the normal way that I would handle that is to have a queue server, and Mojo would subscribe to the queue server, and the background process would be submitting events to the queue, and then Mojo would be reading those events and throwing them out.
Sure. So I mean,
is that how you would do it, or?
I mean, probably yes. If you have that kind of an architecture already,
Yeah.
I would probably a really nice one for it would probably be Redis, and there's a Mojo Redis 2 that exists and is really nice. Is probably how I would look at that if I was going to do that. MongoDB also can do things like this. We're a little bit mad at MongoDB right now because they keep changing their wire protocol on us to the point where Sebastian has stopped supporting his driver for Mongo. Other people have picked it up, but boy, they're not really. They claim to be open source friendly, but just changing their wire protocol out from under you without documenting the changes is really not very friendly.
Right.
So, but yes, I mean, they're assuming you've got ways to talk to these services. It's not hard.
I assume there's no way to use something like Dibbix class inside of Mojo and still be async.
Not in the main process, no. But you could do like my fork call module, fork, make the query, and then have the response be, the response comes back serialized over storable or whatever else you want to do to transport it. So you could do that, and it would be asynchronous enough for anyone else to care. But Dibbix class is not very async friendly, no.
Right.
Assuming this will have killed on me by now. And of course we can test them. What kind of thing would this be if I couldn't test them? So we're going to send a message, wait for a response, test the response. All pretty much what I've shown you before. Obviously we want to request that we can get the main page, and you can start doing WebSocket OK. This tells the internal user agent to connect to the WebSocket. Message OK will wait for a message. We're going to test that the message has element 0, which is 0 because it's a time series, so we know it starts at 0, 0. Obviously, we can't test on this particular example that what the data is because it's random, but we can test that it has a 1 element. Get another message, test that it's the next message time series wise. But you can make this as arbitrarily interesting as you want, of course, when you've got data that makes more sense than mine. All right, so another fun one. And this I've been using all the time at work. Mojolicious commands. So a lot of people think of their app as just the web server. Mojolicious is more than just the web server. It has all kinds of command systems you can build into it. This is where helpers can become very handy. So maybe you have a helper that connects to your database. Then you can expose those through commands that you can use later. Some of the easy ones are the built-in ones, the get command. I want to get Reddit and check for P titles that contain A titles and get the text. That'll give you all of the recent Reddit Perl articles, titles. We can get meta cpan, check for the JSON pointer version, much like the version example I already showed you. But this is where it starts to get fun. You can use that get command against your own app. You don't have to fire up a server in a browser just to check that your app did what you. Yep.
Sorry, can you explain a little more what that first command is doing? I don't.
This one says get that example.
Right. So you're
Then it
getting
does this.
You're getting something from Reddit.
This is a CSS3 selector.
Oh,
so
okay.
it's
All right.
a P tag with the class title, and then the A tags within it that have a class title, and then we get the text from those. So it's all the links,
So it's just grabbing those links.
and that would give you all the recent titles.
All right, I get it.
But then this one is similar, so let me just talk you through that one. Say we go through, this is from my hello example from before. I say get slash, I want the P element, the first one, and it's text. And that'll say hello world. We can also say, what routes do I define? So that's kind of nice, and it'll give you a nice route tree. My favorite is eval. You can run code against your app, which is kind of fun. So I can see what the home path is or what the secrets are. More what I do is app arrow dbh arrow select all array ref, which is especially nice when I need to run just a query against the database and I don't want to have to shell in somewhere or remember what things, or worse, write administration scripts that skew from your actual real world use. I just write one-liners. And because they have the helpers that my app already defined, they're very easy to use. There's a few other extra ones like generate, which lets you build an app. You only need those once. This thing hates me still. You can even add your own. I wrote a Mojo no paste, which is kind of cute. It's sort of a clone of the original no paste, but it uses the Mojo tools. It was mostly to see if I could do it, but it's got a few little handy bells and whistles if you like.
What's no paste?
It's a script that lets you take the contents of a file and put it on a pasty site.
Oh, okay.
So just easy handling. One I like to do is get diff, pipe that into Mojo no paste, and then that'll put it onto a pasty site for me. So the one I like is pasty.org. If you want to go visit that, and it's just like a basic page that's got a big text box, and you fill in some text, and then if you give the link, you hit submit, it'll give you a link back, and you can share that link with everybody, and they can all see which code you're looking at. It's just a paste hosting site. Paste some code. Another one that I wrote, I have a CMS that I wrote called Galileo, and I added a command to Galileo to set up Galileo. So once you cpan Galileo, you then run Galileo setup, and that will set up things like databases and whatever. Or you can import commands from cpan itself. So this is your app, but you can use Minion, for example, which is the companion project from Mojo, which is a worker queue. And you can check to see how your workers are doing, or what jobs are running, or whatever else, by doing your app, Minion worker, my app, Minion job. Liam has already seen that in process at at our office already. We're getting toward the end here, but if you liked those, I recommend Mojo PG, which is our new favorite database driver. It's a wrapper for DBI, Postgres, PG, with as much non-blocking as we can wedge into it. Should be good enough for pretty common use. It will wait while the query is executing. The transport is blocking, unfortunately, but whatever. Can only do so much. Minion I've already talked about. Galileo I've already talked about. Convos is a cool in-browser Mojo-based IRC client that's on CPAN. I like it a lot, and I use it all the time. My NoPaste I already talked about. Redis I already talked about because of JT's question. There are plenty of other cool things too, but these are the ones that I thought I'd mention. So a lot of information in a very short time, but that's why I put the talk online, so you can go back and find your favorite parts. Find me, ask questions whenever, and thank you. So yeah, tons of stuff. I'm sorry. Got to do it. Yes?
So like the Mojo test stuff, that could be used for like any web server, right? That's
Yes.
Doesn't have to be.
Yep, it fires up a regular user agent. You could use it to test your Catalyst app if you wanted. No reason not to.
Is it an extension of like other test things, or
It's mostly wrapping test more, but no, I mean it's actually one of the things that you'll find if you start looking through the Mojo code base. They're all pretty small files. I mean, I think test Mojo is probably only a few hundred lines. It's just little handy wrappers for doing common HTML things, but you know, blending in selectors and you know, posting forms and things in as easy a way as we can think to do it.
Okay.
Anyone else? Questions?
Mojolicious has come a long way since the first time I looked at it.
Yes.
Amazing.
I mean, I wasn't.
I'm interested now.
I
threw it out. I threw it out the window about 2 years ago because I was so frustrated with it. But it looks like it has.
What was frustrating, just if I may ask?
I just hit roadblocks. I couldn't go any further, so I had to restart a project.
Oh, that's too bad.
I couldn't do what I needed to do without running through a whole bunch of hoops that I didn't really want to run through.
I did the same thing 3 years ago. I
So-
was evaluating Mojo and Dancer 1.
I'm very happy the Dancer project exists. And if you can find something they can do better than us, come tell me. But I am happy that they exist. I really am. You know, having anything better than CGI-PM is great for the CPAN community. Web Simple too. You know, we learn from each other as much as we can. I won't say anything bad against them ever. Its big problem for me is that it can't do the async as well.
Yeah.
But it wasn't written for that, so that's. Actually, if I could say.
Had I done that same evaluation today, I think I might have gone Mojo based on the presentation I just saw. But yeah, 3 years ago, I can't remember exactly why because it was 3 years ago, and I don't remember what happened to the but yeah, looking at that was fairly impressive.
I came on board with Mojo in the mid 3.0 cycle. I was added as a core contributor at 4.0, and we're now coming up on 6.0. We're doing a major release about every year. That's me.
That's you.
And it has come a long ways even in then. But the hardest thing people seem to have is finding stuff, which is hard for me to understand because I think we have pretty good documentation. But we still do get people saying, oh, I can't figure out how to do this. And we're like, did you read the documentation?
I have that problem with CPAN because I'm looking for something particular. I have certain words that I'm associating with it, and they just aren't. It just isn't making a connection with CPAN. So I mean, that doesn't surprise me at all.
To start with Mojolicious, I would highly recommend you go to the website, click on documentation, and there will be a list of guides. We wrote guides.
Yeah.
Read those in order, maybe twice. And if there's anything you can't do by that point, either come ask us or, you know, I don't know. We've spent a ton of time on those. If there's anything wrong with it, please come tell us. Anyone else? Anyone else? I'm on IRC all the time, so if you've got questions, ping me. I'm Jay Berger. Pretty obvious. But yeah, thanks a lot.
Thank you.